Hello and welcome to the online edition of Art of the Automobile. My name is Ed Owen. I'm a local car enthusiast and also one of the founders of Art of the Automobile. This year we were scheduled to have Art of the Automobile at Copley Square in downtown Boston on May 3rd. Unfortunately that didn't work out, but we're really still hoping to have that sometime this year. And today we're going to feature a very interesting car, a car that I really love. It has a less storied ownership history than the Benz that we discussed in the last episode, but more on what the model has done and what it had become over time and how it got developed and then how it really found an untimely death. So today we're going to be talking about the Chevy Corvair, which is a lot of interesting firsts on this car for GM and for Chevy. It was really in the 50s they were looking at the impact of compact cars and how they were selling pretty well, and Ed Cole, who was the general manager of Chevrolet, decided that they wanted to create something different for the compact market that was completely dissimilar to anything that was going on in Detroit. And what they created was the Corvair. Now for its first, this is the first unibody car ever made by GM. It is the only American production car to ever have a rear-mounted air-cooled engine. And it's also the first to have four-wheel independent suspension before the Corvette. And it was 4 years later that Ferrari got independent suspension, so it was a pretty significant car at the time. In 1959, on the cover of Time magazine was Ed Cole's face, the general manager of Chevrolet, and this car. And they issued in a story about how the changing designs are coming out of Detroit and what a refreshing change it was. And in 1960, this was Road and Track's Car of the Year. So, of course, success for General Motors is always counted by number of units sold. And the anticipation was pretty high in 1960 for this car to come out with this completely different design. He wanted no tail fins, big displays, no chrome grille, and oddly enough, no engine coolant. In the first year alone, they did over 220,000 sales in units, which is a big success for them. And went all the way through 1965, selling fairly well. And I think a high in 62 of somewhere around 370,000 plus units. So they were very happy with that result, right up to 65 till the Nader days. But we'll talk a little bit more on that in a bit. So what we have today is a 63 900 Monza Spyder edition. In 1962, they introduced the Spyder edition, which was code 690. It was for an extra $300, a little under $400, and it came with a turbo that increased horsepower from 102 to 150, which is about a 47% increase. The idea here was to make a sports car version on the platform of the Corvair. Now you'll see here is the TRW turbo attached here to the carburetor, and of course they had the badging for it. And then they put this heat shield on it to protect what else but the spare tire over the motor. Yeah, a spare tire over the motor, and there will be no dry rotting going on there. But what I also find unique is funny is this car has a lot of bare bones. You know, it was meant to be compact and affordable, so no power seats, no power windows, no power top. But you had to unlock the spare in case anybody wanted to steal it. Also, which was very unique to this car, is if you could look at the way the drive belt comes up, twists around and comes back for the engine cooling fan. It also does the generator here. You get the tensioner. You definitely wanted to make sure you had one of those with you when you traveled. Also unique to this design were the louvers that were set up for the air-cooled motor, which again, this was the only air-cooled American-made motor in a production car. One of the things I really loved about this car is the little details, the badging. If you look here, this is the turbo badge that only came on the Spyder package. And they put it here on the dash for the Monza and the Spyder. And then on both sides of the quarter, you'll see the fender, you'll see the 900 model number of the Monza, and then that 690 code for the Spyder. Comes with that badging. It's really unique. And they did a lot of nice little touches. You'll see the Chevy emblems on both mirrors. This is really cool. So the idea of the car was to come back with a compact car, and in 1960, a brand new Corvair would set you back a little under $2,000. A few years later, with the full Spyder package like this car, it'll run you about $2,800. When you think about Model T Fords were $900 back in the day, it really wasn't that much of a progression. It was still really affordable and a very good value of a car. To put it in terms of what else they had, the Corvette was basically about double the price of this. The base model for the Corvair at $2,000, the base model for the Corvette at $4,000. The fully loaded version on this is $28,000 versus the Corvette would be probably another, over $5,000 at that point. Hagerty and a lot of other people like to call them affordable classics these days, and I think this fits the bill perfectly for an affordable classic. This is a really fun car to drive. It's got the four-wheel independent suspension. Values haven't gone crazy. You know, the lower end is probably $5,000 up to maybe $25,000, and it gives you a lot of great vintage car experience and a fun car to drive. Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room as far as Corvairs go, and that would be Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader was a consumer advocate trying to make a name for himself in the 60s, and he did a lot of great work helping pass some safety laws in 66 that changed a lot of how car safety is today. But in 65, he wrote a book called Unsafe at Any Speed, and it was a lot about the industry and about other cars, but the dominant car in the book was the Corvair. He called it basically the most unsafe car on the road. Obviously GM didn't take very well to that, and it had such an impact when the book came out. It went to the bestseller list, and then in 65 they were just advertising the new one, rolling out, all the fanfare, and they sold about 220,000 in 65, a little over. And the book had such an impact, by 2 years later, 67, 68, they only sold less than 15,000 of them. They ended production in 1969. The crux of Nader's argument was called Liftoff Oversteer. And if you've ever driven a 911 on a track, a Porsche 911 that is, you'll know what I'm talking about. Decelerating into a turn freaks lift on the rear tires and puts side G-force and can cause you to spin. All the rear swing axles have that issue, but he was right about the sway bar issue. The sway bar was supposed to be an initial part of the car design, and for cost-cutting reasons, they cut it out of the car from 60, 61, and 62. They made it mandatory in 63. So subsequently, in 1972, at a study down in Texas A&M, for the US DOT, they retested the car, among other cars, even current cars of that time, and they concluded with other engineers that there was no safety difference between the cars. GM was really upset and took a real hit on their credibility in the late 60s, and they hired investigators to follow Nader around. And they got caught doing it, and they had to pay a $400,000 lawsuit to Nader, or it's probably a little more than that, for invasion of privacy. But the funnier part is, how can you weigh in when you don't even have a driver's license at the time? Well, that concludes our presentation on the 63 Corvair Monza Spyder. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Hagerty Insurance, European Auto Solutions, and ClassicMotorcars.com. And if we do get to have Art of the Automobile this year in downtown Boston, we'd love to see you there.